population lives in a multi-dimensional poverty, compounded by rising youth unemployment, pervasive corruption, and a steep inflation rate. The lack of trust in the judicial system further increases the potential of instability amid the high cost of living among the local population of Liberians. Given the emerging regional threat of military coups, it is imperative for Liberians to oppose unconstitutional and disruptive governance methods. Practical measures, therefore, must be taken to safeguard and strengthen our democracy against external influences. The most vital steps include improving governance for our people, ensuring easy and equitable access to justice, enhancing measures of public accountability without cherry-picking, fear, or favor, and guaranteeing freedom of speech for all. Whether baseless or justified, these fundamental inadequacies before 1989 were exploited by protagonists of the Liberian Civil War. The current government must seize upon this opportunity, provided by the irreversible war the economic crimes court mandate, to lay a fresh foundation for building trust and confidence in Liberia's judicial system. While Stan rallies Liberians to reject all appearances and symbols of undemocratic takeovers in a few West African countries, we also believe this negative regional experience should serve as a cautionary tale for our own government to prioritize the socio-economic and human resource development of its people, to strengthen their support for democratic governance. Subsequently, the legislature, under the leadership of Speaker J. Funati Kofa and Senate Pro Tempore Youngly Kanga Lawrence, made a decision that resonated commendably with the people, with the House passing a resolution calling for the establishment of war and economic crimes, quote, for Liberia, which was reconciled a month later through a resolution by the Liberian Senate. Stan commends the House leadership and all its members for this historic step forward. The urgency of this national moral and legal imperative prompted Stan to issue several statements calling for the President of Liberia, His Excellency Joseph Yima Boakai, to establish the Office of a War and Economic Crimes Court for Liberia. Against this backdrop, to ensure accountability for war crimes committed between 1979 and 2003, and economic crimes between 1979 and 2024, President Joseph Yima Boakai issued Executive Order number 131, establishing the Office of the War and Economic Crimes Court for Liberia, and appointing Councillor Jonathan Masakwe as its Executive Director. The resolution, whereas in May 2005, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC, was created by an act of the legislature to investigate gross human rights violations, systematic abuses, and violations of international humanitarian law occurring between 1979 January and 14 October 2023. Whereas the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC, commenced and concluded its mandate, followed by a submission of its final and consolidated report to the legislature on June 30th, 2009. Whereas, in view of established facts as sufficiently documented by the TRC and other sources, at the early stages of the war, the constituted government was overthrown, resulting in the total breakdown of law and order, placing the entire population at great peril without protection, security, or defense against the onslaught of the various warring factions. Whereas it has been established that as a consequence of the deliberate, criminal, greedy, and thoughtless actions of warring factions, all institutions within the Republic of Liberia collapse, and these various warring factions partition the country and govern their respective enclaves, where combatants, acting on the command of their leaders, violated the conventions of war by engaging in rape, torture, mass executions, slavery, as well as the use of children in active combat. Whereas it has been established that the human cost of the war, though incalculable, amount for not less than 1.5 million people uprooted and displaced, is staggering 500,000 to 750,000 psychological and or physical injuries, as well as a minimum 250,000 innocent victims brutally murdered. Whereas it has been established that the direct impact of the war on the Liberian economy in terms of lost revenue, productivity, and goodwill, as well as destruction of the infrastructure, underemployment, accrued interest, etc., is estimated at between 100 and 150 billion United States dollars. Whereas it has been established that in order to prevent mass extermination of civilians, an international military force known as the Economic Community of West African States Monitoring Group, ECOMOG, was deployed in the Republic of Liberia against fierce resistance from common armed warring factions. Whereas it has been established and documented evidence of atrocities committed in Liberia during the war are currently in the possession of, among others, the United Nations, the United States government, the European Union, the Special Court for Sierra Leone, the international media, the Economic Community of West African States, the Liberian Truth and Reconciliation Commission, as well as some of the victims themselves. Whereas, taking into consideration that an act of the legislature, which brought the TRC expressly and unambiguously states that all recommendations of the TRC submitted before the legislature is law. Whereas, being cognizant of this domestic and international responsibility to address egregious crimes which are not pardonable under international law, ensuring that individuals bearing the greatest responsibility for human rights abuses or for heinous crimes are held to account. Whereas, acknowledging a joint resolution of the legislature which strengthened the authority of the President of Liberia, His Excellency Joseph Yima Boakai, to begin the scrupulous implementation of the TRC process. Whereas, recognizing the power of the President of Liberia, His Excellency Joseph Yima Boakai, pursuant to his constitutional authority, to appoint an executive director of the Office of War and Economic Crimes Court in Liberia, which was rightfully exercised through the appointment of Mr. Jonathan Masakwe as executive director. Now, therefore, by the power vested as stipulated and authorized by our various leadership structures, the Solidarity and Trust for a New Day stand, and the Liberia NGOs Network Link, which comprises dozens of civil society organizations, do hereby declare support for the appointment of Councillor Jonathan Masakwe as Executive Director of the Office of War and Economic Crimes Court. Prepare this 4th day of July in the year of our Lord 2024, signed on behalf of the Coordinating Committee of STEM and Liberia NGOs Network and other members of these coordinating committees are the following signatories: Mobake Molu, Chairman of the Director and Trust for a New Day; K. Veronica Slobo, Gender Coordinator, Liberia NGOs Network Link; Beatrice Togba Wo, Program Coordinator, Liberia NGOs Network Link; Rosetta B. Cholople, Secretary General, Liberia NGOs Network Link; Mike D. Flomo, National Director, Global Justice, Peace and Human Rights Advocacy Network; Ambassador Kona K. Arageti, Global Advancement for Refugees, Migrants, and Stateless Persons Incorporated. Approve the Chairman of all Chairmen, Stephen B. Nomo, National Chairman, Data Director, Liberia NGOs Network. I thank you very much.